Hey, welcome. Today we're diving into a really powerful philosophy about wealth that says your biggest financial problem, well, it isn't your debt and it's not your income. Nope, it's something you carry around with you in your head every single day. Let's get right into it. So, right out of the gate, the source material hits you with this. And yeah, it's a little confrontational, but that's the whole point. The entire idea we're exploring today is built on this foundation of, radical personal accountability. The message is clear: don't wait for a rescue, because it's on you to take control. Okay, so if you're not supposed to wait for anyone else to fix things, what's the first move? Well, according to this philosophy, it all starts by figuring out what your biggest liability really is, and I'm gonna bet it's not what you think. Seriously, think about it for a second. When I ask that, what pops into your head? Maybe it's your car payment, right? Or credit card debts, a mortgage? You might be surprised to hear that, according to our source, the real answer isn't on your bank statement at all. And there it is, your single biggest liability. It's your excuses. That's a powerful thought, isn't it? Because these aren't just harmless words. They're like these invisible walls that actually stop you from even stepping onto the field to play the game of creating wealth. And this is what underpins the whole idea: 99%. The source argues that this is how much of your life is actually under your direct control. I mean, that's a huge claim. It completely gets rid of that safety net of blaming someone or something else. And this really captures the end result. See, the moment you start blaming something outside of yourself for your problems, you're basically handing over the steering wheel of your own life. You go from being the driver to just being a passenger. And in the words of the source, you've just adopted the powerless mindset of a vulnerable victim. So this choice, to be the driver or the passenger, it leads to two completely different ways of looking at the exact same world. Let's break down what our source calls the two opposing mindsets: the poor mindset and the rich mindset. The really key insight here isn't about trying to avoid problems, because problems are going to happen. It's all about how you react when they do. So imagine two people get laid off from the same job. The person with the poor mindset, they ask, "Whose fault is this?" And they just get stuck there, angry and resentful. But the person with the rich mindset, they ask, "Okay, what can I learn from this?" And they immediately start looking for the next opportunity, turning a setback into a stepping stone. But, how does this internal mindset actually show up in the real world? Well, the source says it's surprisingly simple. You can actually hear it in the words people use every single day. Your language gives your mindset away. And here it is. This right here is the phrase the source calls a mental trap. This is the language of what it calls the poor dad mindset. It's a full stop. It's a statement of fact that just shuts down any possibility. And the thinking behind this is that these words, "I can't," they act like an off switch for your brain. The second you say them, you're telling your mind that the problem is unsolvable, so it just stops looking for solutions. It literally becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, check out the alternative. It's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. The source's rich dad figure apparently refused to say, "I can't afford it." Instead, he trained himself to always ask this question. See the difference? Just by asking how instead of saying can't, you're flipping that switch in your brain back to the on position. The source calls this firing up your thought engine. All of a sudden, your mind is forced to start brainstorming, to get creative, to look for pathways and possibilities that were totally invisible just a second ago. But here's the thing. When you start asking how, you're going to start trying new things. And when you try new things, sometimes you're going to fail. And this brings us to another huge split between these two mindsets: how they think about mistakes. Now, the source has a really sharp critique of our education system. The argument is that from a very young age, we're all trained to be afraid of being wrong, getting a bad grade, giving the wrong answer. It's punished. And what that does is create adults who are just terrified of taking risks. But then you get out into the real world of business and investing, what the source calls the investor quadrant, and the rules are the complete opposite. Out here, mistakes aren't failures, they're just data. Success comes from making mistakes, learning from them super fast, and then adjusting your course. And this creates this fundamental divide in the world. You have the spectators, who are too afraid of being wrong to even try, and then you have the players, who are actually in the game making moves. And this quote just sums up the whole social dynamic, doesn't it? Someone with a player mindset is actively looking for people who are smarter and better than they are, because that's how you get better. But the victim mindset, well, they're looking for a support group, people who will just agree with them and validate their excuses. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. Let's talk about the source's big call to action, how you actually make that shift from being a spectator on the sidelines to becoming a player on the field. Now, this is probably the single most common excuse out there, right? I don't have the money. And the source meets this one head on, calling it a total cop-out. The argument is that in today's world, there is tons of capital out there actively looking for good deals. If you have the financial knowledge and a solid plan, the money will find you. So the real barrier isn't a lack of money, it's a lack of knowledge. So how do you do it? How do you get that knowledge? The source lays out this three-part formula for taking total responsibility. And notice, it's not just about money. First, you take 100% ownership of your health. Second, you take 100% ownership of your relationships. And third, you take 100% ownership of your cash flow. The argument is that this is the journey from being what it calls a passive church mouse to being an active producer in your own life. And when it all comes down to it, this is the core message. Everything we've talked about today leads to this one single idea. Your bank account is not the source of your wealth. It's just a reflection of it. It's a lagging indicator of the mindset you choose to bring to the world every single morning. And so, that leaves us with the final question, the one the source poses to every single one of us. When you look at your words, your reactions to problems, and the choices you make every day, are you a spectator, just watching from the stands, or are you a player, down in the game? Because according to this philosophy, the answer to that question determines everything.